Good evening, everybody, and you're all very welcome to Limerick City and County Council's Tidy Towns seminar, which is now a webinar. Normally, we would have one every year around this time, so we're delighted to have you here this evening. We really hope you're all keeping safe and well, and I think you'll be delighted with our presentation this evening from Dr Fiona Mac Gowan. Fiona is a Tidy Towns person herself. She's with Abbey League's Tidy Towns. She's also a freelance ecologist, a national Tidy Towns adjudicator, and she has the passion for the environment and for working with community groups in particular, like yourselves. So I'm going to hand over to Fiona now. The questions and answers that we will do, please put them in the Q&A. Type them into the Q&A and we will deal with them then. At the end of the presentation, once Fiona has given her presentation, and I'll give you a few more updates after that. All right, it's over to Fiona. Thanks, Fiona.
Thanks, Sinead. Good evening, everybody. It's great to virtually be in Limerick. Pity now that I'm not able to get down to you, but I look forward to when we're back to some good times again soon. So I am here to talk to you about the nature and biodiversity category in the Tidy Towns competition, and I suppose hopefully with some ideas, and also kind of going back to basics a little bit and kind of looking at why we need to do what can be done. I suppose we can get wrapped up in the competition and the points and all that kind of thing, but actually the Tidy Towns is a fantastic vehicle for, as you know, the Tidy Towns competition is a terrific way of enhancing the place where you live, both for residents and visitors alike. But I always like to include in the visitor and resident category our biodiversity. So to get to my first slide, as I say, getting right back to basics, what is the importance of biodiversity and ecology? Just to kind of, I suppose I'd like to remind people that humans are an integral part of the biodiversity of the earth, because I think a lot of the time we forget that. And looking at ecology itself, it is a branch of the sciences, and it deals with the interrelations between living things and the places that they live. And so that means then it also includes, human beings' dealings and interactions. So biodiversity and ecology affect our lives every day, often and usually without us even realizing it. But why do we need to protect biodiversity? We're hearing a lot about the climate change crisis at the moment, but the biodiversity crisis is very much a part of that. It's wrapped up in it. And to give you an idea, just, we think of our lovely country as being lovely green Ireland, which it is, but we do have our biodiversity problems here too, and that this is where Tidy Towns can really help here, because we can make changes in our own localities that really are really important. So to give a few examples of what's going on with biodiversity in Ireland, our bumblebee numbers have decreased by 17%, so nearly 1/5 since 2012 alone. And we can only measure them from 2012 because that's when, the National Biodiversity Data Centre, we're really we're gathering in the numbers. But we know that even by 2012, the numbers would have been much lower than they had originally been. So, there's big decreases going on out there. Another example would be the beautiful curlew. I'm sure many of you are familiar with its lovely call. When I was in college back in the 1990s, and we used to go on field trips up the Dublin and Wicklow Mountains, curlews were a common sound. But now it's very rare that you will hear them. But their breeding pairs have gone down from 200,000 to around 200 pairs. And I actually was at a talk last night, a webinar online, And I heard that it's not even 200 pairs, that we're down to 130 breeding pairs now. So it's very, very scary when you look at those numbers. The main reason for both for our biodiversity crisis would be a loss of habitat. And you can see that with curlews, you know, they would normally breed in kind of wet corners of fields, you know, wet grassland areas. And you know, with changes, there's been huge changes in agriculture and changes in our use of the land in the last few decades, and this has resulted in their numbers decreasing, part of the reason. And then with bumblebees as well, you know, the habitats that they need have been disappearing as well. So with pollinators, it's their loss of food, and herbicide misuse is another factor. And so when I say food, pollinators, they need pollen and they need nectar, as you know, in flowers. And there just are not as many areas of wildflowers as there used to be. And also the way we garden the flowers that we use hasn't helped. And I'm going to talk about that later on. So I'm sure you're all aware of the National Biodiversity Data Centre, which is based down in Waterford, and they've been gathering records since 2012. And it's because of this, you know, we're able to, we can track how things are changing in Ireland. But they have wonderful tools. They're always looking for records. So it's a great opportunity for Tidy Towns groups to get involved and to do some citizen science work and do some recording. So if you haven't already looked at their website, biodiversityireland.ie, I really recommend having a look. But the work that they're doing has led to the production of the All-Ireland Pollinator Plan. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that. So looking at the bumblebee numbers that have decreased, so this is a few more details. I have the next few slides now are all information from the National Biodiversity Data Centre website. It's a font of all sorts of really useful information. And lots of ideas about, you know, how to, you know, it's not just giving a bit of bad news, but it's showing how, you know, you can make changes, we can make changes that can help. But it's important to kind of remind ourselves that, you know, we have 98 wild bee species and 1/3 of them are threatened with extinction in Ireland. So, you know, we need to be thinking of these kind of things. So, you know, of our 99 bee species, this is how they're split up. Everybody knows the honeybee. We've only got the one species of honeybee, but we actually have 21 species of bumblebee and 77 species of solitary bees. And the solitary bees are a fascinating group, and oftentimes, you know, we may not even realize that we're looking at them. They might look like flies, or they could look like hoverflies, or this one here, you know, looks a bit like a wasp. But they're really important wild bees, and they actually carry out most of the pollination that we need done for our you know, fruit and that kind of thing. So I just wanted to highlight some of the life cycles, because in looking at the life cycles, it gives us a better idea of how we can help the pollinator species, because we know then what type of habitat they need. And with bumblebees, the queen is the all-important I was going to say person, the all-important member of the bumblebee family, obviously, and she makes a nest in the autumn time, and she hibernates in this nest, and she would nest at the base of hedgerows, at the base of walls, in kind of grassy places, and in the wintertime, she likes to nest in a north-facing spot, and then in the summertime, she would make a nest for laying her eggs, and this nest would be generally kind of more maybe east or west facing. So she will nest in different places and could be on different sides of the road or the lane or whatever. So it's just important to know that this is important habitat for her, but also the food that is needed. So in the springtime, she would emerge pretty soon now, in the next few weeks, if we get any warm weather. I know we're due to get cold weather next week, but after that, if the weather gets mild, you start seeing a few bumblebees out, and these will be queens that are emerging from hibernation, and they are looking for food. Obviously, they're going to be very hungry after the winter time, and of course there's very little very few flowers out at that time, so that's where the crocuses, the snowdrops, are important. But the main ones are the dandelions that will be coming out kind of in March time, and also willow flowers. You know, the pussy willows, they'll be out soon. They're very important as well. And there, I've gone ahead of myself there, you can see. So in the early spring, when the queens then will be establishing their nests, that's when they need the plants that are out, so the dandelions and the willow. And then in spring and summer, the nests are growing and the workers are active, and they're out looking for lots of pollen and nectar to feed the young bees coming up behind them. And then in the autumn time, the queens are getting ready for hibernation and they need to fatten up. So that's when things like ivy are really important. So we'll talk about that later too, because ivy is one of the very few plants that's in flower in October, November time. There's the solitary bee life cycle, and they have a different type of life cycle, but they need areas that are, it's interesting, they need a different type of area. They need areas that are sandy. They make this little nest and lay the eggs, and then the eggs are left to fend for themselves. But the queen, the female, she makes sure that she makes the nest near a place where there's going to be food when they emerge. So the kind of habitats that they need would be kind of, you know, sandy banks maybe, even these areas of kind of open exposed soil, and they like them to be kind of south and east facing. So this is something to think about maybe if you're doing a little bit of habitat creation in your localities. And then looking at having a think about bug hotels and that kind of thing. The new advice now is that big is not better. So I would look at it in a couple of ways, in that you can have the lovely big colourful bug hotels, and I think they're great for spreading the word, creating awareness, letting people know that, you know, our invertebrates are very important. But if you're looking to actually create habitat for bees and other invertebrates to nest, then having small little bee hotels, I suppose, is much better. It's safer and healthier for them, because if you have a large bug hotel, it's disease can spread and things like that, so it's not such a good idea. But very simple things, you know, this is like an old tin can that has been filled with bamboo shoots. These are blocks of wood that just have had holes drilled in them, so things like that are great. They're perfect. And this is just looking at who are the pollinators in Ireland. So we've gone through, we have the honeybee, the bumblebee, the solitary bees, and then the other pollinators are the butterflies, of course, butterflies and moths. Ants are important, and the wasps are important too. And then we have other types of insects. We have hoverflies and these amazing bee mimics, which are actually flies, but they're pretending to look like they're looking like bees, and you can get some amazing looking species. And I'm not sure if any of you are, I'm sure probably several of you are signed up for the All Ireland Pollinator Plan newsletter, which Dr. Una Fitzpatrick sends out every month. So this page is from the latest newsletter that came in the other day, and it's very interesting because it's the results of their analysis of plants that bees were using to feed on last year. And they're right up the top. Number one is the dandelion. And it's so important. You can see it's more than double the number of sightings on bush vetch, which is the number 2 plant. So dandelion is really important. And you can see going down, there's the clovers, heather, cotoneaster, bramble, knapweed, thistles, apple blossom and willow. And then they also kind of looked at it through the months. So in February, as we are now, the important plants are garden heathers, the winter hellebores, dandelions, crocus. There's March, dandelion again, heathers again, willow, lungwort. April, we've dandelion again, bushvetch, rosemary, garden heathers, willow. May, bushvetch, dandelion, cotoneaster, apple blossom, red clover. And into the summer then we've got June, we've got white clover, bramble, birds for trefoil, bushvetch, and on down through the summer months, and then down into October there, and we have ivy and sunflowers. So it's very interesting. So I'm just saying, remember this slide because I'll be asking questions later. So this is where Tidy Towns comes in, and there are endless possibilities for projects that will suit your town or village. So where do you look for inspiration and guidance? So the first thing I would always say to groups is to review the work that you're doing, look at the projects that you're working on, that you have worked on, and see if anything can be altered or changed to make the work that you're, the project or the area more biodiversity friendly. So the first place you could look is at the grass mowing regimes in your area. And we're increasingly looking at leaving grass verges to come into flower in the summertime and let the wildflowers flower. This is a road verge coming into a village in County Carlow, and you can see they have a lovely mown verge. The mown edge, lets people know that this area is being looked after, it's being managed. Usually just the width of a moor is fine. And then the grassy wildflower areas let grow in at this is kind of coming into the base of a fence. So now that this is good bumblebee nesting habitat. But also in a place like this, I have to say I love grass paths. I think they're very attractive. I think they really kind of are, invite the walker. This is a park up in Marley Park up in Dublin, it's their wildflower meadow with the grass path through, and it's lovely. Everybody loves walking through it. And here's the dandelion. So very soon now it's going to be the don't mow, let it grow motto, which I think is so important. So I showed you the list there of the important plants, and you saw that dandelions are crucial. So this actually, I took this picture last year. So when the pandemic started last March, lockdown, and there wasn't as much mowing, so there was a profusion of wildflowers all over the place. People were noticing it. The dandelions were able to grow, and this was great for the bumblebees. So this is a housing estate, kind of the grassy area that they're usually mad to mow, but it got left for an extra maybe 6 weeks last spring, and it was brilliant for wildflowers. So this would actually be classed as a short wildflower meadow. And I just wanted to kind of highlight, when you have a look at the dandelion flower and you look into it, it's not one flower, it is actually a lot of flowers. So each of these petals represents a flower. So this is why the dandelion is such a wonderful food source for bees, because there's a huge amount of nectar and pollen in it. So you could be looking in there at about 100 separate little flowers within this composite. So that's why it's in the daisy family. Botanically, it's known as the composite family. And there's a butterfly enjoying it too. And there we get onto ivy, and I just want to highlight that ivy is a crucially important species for biodiversity in Ireland. And the reasons are that, it's a native plant. It's native to our kind of the edges of our woodland. So now our hedgerows would be the kind of typical a woodland edge species. It's where ivy has adapted, and walls as well, of course. But the reason it's so important, number one, it's evergreen, and we have very few native evergreen plants. So it means that a lot of species have adapted to use ivy to hibernate in the wintertime. And then the other thing is that it comes into flower very late in the season, in around kind of October, November is when it's in flower, and then it's in fruit December, January. So this is a time when hardly anything else is in flower or in berry. So the flowers are really important for bees before they head into hibernation. And then the berries are really important for birds and small mammals, providing food for them. You know, at the time like this now, if there's any berries left before, you know, other things start growing. It is, ivy obviously is problematic if you're dealing with old buildings, or if it gets too top heavy on a tree. So a short back and sides, as we call it, can be recommended. But it's just something to think of that, you know, if you're thinking the ivy needs to come down, have a good look and think about it. You know, is it really necessary? And another thing to remember about ivy is that it's not a parasite. It has its own root system. It makes all its own food. So it uses trees and walls for support, but it doesn't take nutrients from trees that it's growing on. Nettles are another thing that are, you know, can be the bane of some gardeners' lives, but they are actually very important for biodiversity as well. They host 5 different butterfly species. They're the host plant for 5 species, which is amazing when you think of it. These are the caterpillars of the peacock butterfly, the beautiful butterfly here. So it can be very important. So just leaving a corner, an area with nettles can be a really good thing for biodiversity, and letting people know that it is. So, you know, you can advertise the fact that that's what you're doing. So getting onto the flower planting regime. So things have been changing in tidy towns in recent years, and we're used to seeing amazing displays of plants, you know, in the last few years. And the thing is that while these were terrific for colour and they look gorgeous, they were very highly bred. There would have been, you know, there's pelargoniums, begonias, those kind of plants. They're great for colour for a few months of the summer, but they're so highly bred that often they don't have any pollen. Or else there are so many petals on them that the pollinators couldn't actually physically get at the pollen that's in them. And so you can have these beautiful displays of plants, but if you stand closely and look at them, you'll notice that, you know, there's no home of a bee or other pollinators around them, so they're no food value. So I feel really strongly that with tidy towns, you know, when it comes to flower and plant displays, you know, there's several reasons behind them. Very much it's about, you know, making a place more lovely to look at, which I would very strongly agree with. But I feel that if you're going to go to the bother of doing that, then making sure that the plants used are pollinator friendly is really important. And the fact is that there's a huge long list of flowers and plants that are pollinator friendly, and so just to use them when you're going about it. That's a painted lady butterfly there feeding on an echinacea flower, the cone flower, and this is a dahlia with a bee on it. I'm not sure which species now, it's unusual looking. And these are some kind of herbaceous perennials, and putting on a great display in a few. There was a couple of different spots there. So I think it's important that talking to your local garden centre, you know, with regard to your plans for planting, because we have developed the habit of, you know, getting the bedding plants in the early summer and having them for the summertime. Whereas now with the pollinator friendly planting, we're moving into using herbaceous perennials. and that kind of thing. So it's a different way of planting. So it's you know, building up a bed. They can go into containers as well, but often it could be a case of, with the perennials, you know, you plant them the once and they will last for years. Where, you know, compared to having to buy the annuals every year and having all the work involved every year. But it's a case of, you know, as I say, talking to your garden centre and seeing about maybe stocking different varieties of plants. And if you're going to do that, to bring along a copy of the gardener's version of the All Ireland Pollinator Plan. And there's lots in it. And then the other thing is, this is the pollinator friendly planting code. And I'm not sure that too many groups are aware of this, but it's a wonderful tool to have. It's freely available on the pollinators.ie website, and it gives a list of all the plants that are pollinator friendly. But what I love about it is it has them broken up into different groups. So ones that are flowering, that look great in the spring or in the autumn, ones that are good for climbing, or, you know, are bedding, or different situations, shady places, sunny places. So it's really very helpful. Another thing to look at is your tree planting regime. And when you're planting individual trees, are you thinking about using native species? Just because the native species are of more use to our you know, species of wildlife, birds and mammals and insects. That's a female blackbird sitting on the rowan tree outside the front of my house. And these are lovely hedgerow of the native hawthorn or whitethorn. So I mean, they can look gorgeous. And there's a beautiful old oak tree. And something like looking at a you know, a large oak tree like that, it kind of highlights the difference between using trees that are native species and that aren't. So the oak tree is native to Ireland, and, you know, is so well established here that we know that the tree itself is a habitat, and that up to 200 different species of wildlife can live on an oak tree. So, you know, of itself, it's fantastic. And I just have a note there at the bottom. Are you aware of the Irish charity Trees on the Land? That's their website there, because they're doing great work with community groups all over the country and private landowners, but they work with people who want to plant native Irish trees, and they are gathering seed all around the country and growing them on, and then they're passing them on free to community groups who are interested as whips. So they're very easy to plant, and they will grow and settle in very quickly. Weed control then is another thing to think about. This is one of those pictures that tells 1,000 words. We have two different management regimes on either side of the one road. And I just love to see the cow parsley billowing in the breeze in May time. I'd be looking forward to it coming out. And then on this side, it's all been sprayed. And I know somebody was just thinking they were trying to make it look tidy. But I have to say, I don't agree. I think, and what I find with the when it comes to the herbicide use is that the browning of the you know, the killing of the vegetation and making it turn brown, it kind of sticks out. Whereas if something is green, your eye will kind of skim past it. But now, after me telling you about how important the base of hedgerows are for bumblebees, I just hate to think, I'd say, you know, there could have been several nest sites that would have been where the occupants would have been killed off, because herbicide is actually pesticide, so it will kill invertebrates and insects that it comes in contact with, or certainly debilitate them so much that it can lead to their death. So there's lots of guidance out there if you're looking for ideas. I've highlighted the pollinators.ie website, which is fantastic. If you go into their resources section, there's so many things there. You know, there's resources You know, you have the All Ireland Pollinator Plan, you have the version for communities, which is especially written for tidy towns groups. You have versions for businesses, for farmers, for gardeners, for school children. And, you know, tidy towns groups can help in disseminating this information by, say, you know, have you approached your local schools and let them know that there's a Junior All Ireland Pollinator Plan available, and that there's lots of resources for school children on the website. Then other websites that are great as well. This is the Royal Horticultural Society over in Britain, and they're very conscious of pollinators. And you're probably familiar with this sign, RHS Plants for Pollinators, because it's used on plants that are sold in Irish garden centres as well. I know that the All Ireland Pollinator Plan team are working with garden centres to come up with an Irish version, but until they do, this is the one to look for. But the RHS website is, I think it's rhs.org.uk. That has lots, huge amount of information on it as well about plants, and you know, where to plant them, and ones that are good for pollinators too. And this is just to give an example of what you can get for yourselves on the pollinators.ie website. So they've got lots of these how-to guides, which are great for different project ideas. They have little kind of flyers on different projects. This one is all about herbs. Herbs are great for pollinators, as well as looking good and providing some food for ourselves. There's the local communities version, so that's the kind of the tidy towns version of the pollinator plan. And then this here, just to make sure you're aware of it, this is a template for a sign that you can put up if you are, you know, managing an area for wildlife. So it could be some of those grass verges that you're leaving to grow, you know, longer for biodiversity, and you might just be mowing the edge. And this, you can print out this sign. You can just use the template. You can take it to a printer's, or you can print them out yourselves, and just you know, stick them up. And they can be a great way of letting people know this area is being managed. We are looking after it, and this is what we're doing. And then people can go and look up the website themselves too. And as you can see, they have the Tidy Towns logo. And then, yes, I'm going to keep pushing the pollinator friendly planting code, because as I say, I'm not sure that groups realize this is up there on the website, and it's really helpful. So this is, if you were to have a look through it, this is what you'd see. You know, they highlight things different times of the year, the bulbs, perennials, climbers, all the different types of plants, and then the different, when the, you know, autumn ones, winter ones, different seasons. So as I say, it's really helpful. And then to have want to get some nice colourful pictures now to show different ideas and different examples. So I'm getting back to, this is one of my dahlias here now, and just to highlight that often, you know, it's like the physical form of the plant makes a difference. So, you know, the old-fashioned types of dahlias, the pom-pom dahlias, there were, you know, lots and lots of petals. And unfortunately, we found that the pollinator species just physically can't get in at the pollen. So using the open flowered types of dahlias is much better for them. They love those. There's a lovely row of sunflower seeds. I love this because it was actually the edge of a car park, and it was all tarmac, and there was just a narrow little area of soil at the base of a wooden fence, and it was enough room to plant in this terrific show of sunflowers. And then some different types of plants you can see. This is actually an elder bush, so it's the same species as the native elder bush that grows wild in our hedges, but it's just as a, you know, a coloured version for the gardens, a lovely purple version. And this one is actually in my own garden, and the flowers are pink, and then the berries. So I make the elderflower cordial. It's fine. So it's serving me and the pollinators, so everybody's happy. Just some example of herbaceous perennial planting. All of these would be pollinator friendly, and they put on a terrific show. And, you know, depending on what species you use, you can, you know, have things starting to flower now. So these are hellebores, winter hellebores. I have some in my garden that are flowering now. So, you know, you can end up having colour going from kind of January, February, all the way through the year, right through to October, November. And it just means that you've colour to enjoy all through the year. This is actually Westport, the octagon in the centre of Westport, with some lovely planting, and I'm going to look at that in detail now shortly. So this is a lovely flower bed. This is down in Kilkenny. I took this picture, but just to show, you know, this is a perennial bed. So once they get established, they need very little work, hardly any work, and it's great. They'll just put on a good show and keep everybody happy. So kind of dissecting that bed, you can see what's in it. We have here, this is red bistort or persicaria. It can be a little bit of a bully. It can spread, but it gives great height and it gives great colour for it's in flower for about 4 or 5 months. Because I have it in my front garden, and the bees and the hoverflies absolutely love it. My favourites are the hardy geraniums, the crane's bills here out the front, and they're great because you can get them in a variety of colours. You can get whites, blues, pinks, purples, and you know, you can have several different kinds, and they, as I say, they will flower for months and months, and they're great. They'll live for 10, 12 years longer. And then having this ornamental grass here, it's great for structure. So the grasses aren't of much benefit for the pollinators, but they have their own role. They're wind pollinated plants rather than insect pollinated. But you know, the secret, I think, to if you're going to make some beds like this in your local areas is to have a bit of structure, so that there's a little bit of kind of an architectural detail to it, and having a few grasses kind of adds to this in a simple way but effective. And it's lovely if there's a bit of a breeze, you know, they'll make a nice noise. So having a look here at this planting in Westport, I was at a great talk recently by the Mayo architect, talking about how they turned kind of Westport around, working with the Tidy Towns group there. And he was saying that they had a Frenchman come in and advise them on their planting. And they changed the way they were planting in the town, and very cognizant of pollinators, but of colour that, as I say, went on for months and months. And so this style is what the Frenchman brought with him. So just to, as I say, to dissect the bed, again, we're looking at a bit of architectural detail in that at the back we have the tall plants of fennel and Verbena bonariensis. Both are great for pollinators. And fennel, when the seeds come on them in the autumn, the birds love them too. But as I said, they're giving great structure there at the back of the bed. We have our open flowered dahlias, like I was explaining earlier. We also have the many petaled form here. So, you know, I'm not saying not to use the many petaled forms, but that if you are going to use them, to also, you know, throw in an open flowered one as well, and then you're keeping everybody happy. There's a lovely little Japanese maple in the middle there. Again, that's about structure, and kind of giving a bit of interest, especially in the autumn time. It's got lovely colour. This is a lovely plant here, purple loosestrife. It's actually a native Irish wildflower, but it puts on a good show. There's catmint in at the back here with lovely blue flowers. The bees love that. And actually bees, you know, the colours that they see are a bit different to ourselves. They see a wider spectrum of colours, but blue is very much kind of would be their favourite colour. So they love blue flowers. So what else have we got? We've got a hoikera there. So again, that's giving a bit of structure. And campanula, the bellflowers there, and the cosmos. So the cosmos are annuals. They need to be planted every year, probably as are the fuchsia as well, because they're not, the fuchsia aren't winter hardy, nor the cosmos, but as the cosmos are still, they're good for the pollinators, but there's as I say, there's a mix here. The dahlias are ones that would need to be planted every year, although I'm finding mine are surviving now. I don't know, maybe about this winter has been colder, but last winter was mild and they survived through. So with climate change, things are changing. So just to focus on different plants. So I'm just going to kind of give you a few plants that I find are great they give great bang for their buck. They're, they will live for years and years in a bed, and they will provide colour for months and months. So the penstemons come in a few different colours. They like the limey soils particularly. I have a big one now in my front garden, but it's great. It'll start flowering in April, and my one actually still had flowers at Christmas time this year, or just gone last year. So they flower for a long time. And this one here, I love this. This is Lady's Mantle, Camilla Malice. It's a native Irish plant, but it's lovely for the edges of beds. It has really delicate green flowers. And what I love about it is in the rain, after the rain, it catches the drops on its leaves. They look like little pearls. So it's a good one to have in Ireland. These are Estrancias. Masterwort is their English name. Another plant that's great for flowering from springtime right through till the end of autumn, and you can get them in a few different colorways, and the hoverflies love these. There's Japanese anemones, so they're lovely for autumn color. They kind of start flowering kind of late July, August, but they will go on through till October. You can get them in kind of pink and white different varieties. They're good for adding a bit of height. They can grow nearly to a meter, so they can be good maybe for the back of a bed. And here's the heathers. You might remember they cropped up now as being the bees' favorite plants, kind of especially in springtime. So they have an important role to play. So in getting varieties that flower in the spring or in the winter time is great for for having color at different seasons. This is Sedum Autumn Joy, another one that's great for the autumn time. As you can see, the butterflies love that. There's some tortoiseshell butterflies enjoying it. And they will flower until the first frosts, so they're great. There's the hardy geraniums, just showing a few different varieties. These ones here are growing on the top of a wall near where I live, and they put on a great show every year. They're gorgeous. And then just some other ideas to think about: community orchards, if you have the space. If you don't have space, have you thought about planting a hedge that we call an edible hedge? So it would be a hedge featuring things like raspberries here. There's a bit of juniper, hazel. You can have fruit trees in your hedge as well. You have your apples here, pears, plums, cherries. And then there's an elder. So an edible hedge can make a lovely feature. All of those species are pollinator friendly, but also the fact that they're edible, they can be used you can end up getting great community events out of using your edible hedge, having a harvest time event. Yeah, you could have cookery competitions, all sorts of things. And then the kids love getting involved in gathering as well. And just a little bit about baskets. Pollinator friendly hanging baskets are possible. And a website I find great for this is the Gardener's World magazine website. And Gardener's World, it's a BBC magazine based on the terrific BBC gardening show, and it's got a great website where it'll go through things like this. This was coming up with a pollinator friendly hanging basket, and showing how to make it in an environmentally friendly way using some old Leylandii cuttings. So the Leylandii are good for something to make your basket, and they go through, there's a list of the species that they put into the basket. So all of these are pollinator friendly. The Bidens is a plant, I think, that's recently kind of come to the fore, and it seems to be particularly the pollinators really enjoy that one. And lavenders and thymes. So all the herb species are great. So it's just to show kind of the old style of pot planting and how it's changing. On this side, I have the old style, that, you know, lovely show there with the pelargoniums and petunias, and the begonias there. But unfortunately, you know, none of them are any good for feeding our pollinators. So kind of just changing the style a bit. And we have a lovely daisy plant here. All these daisies, the South African daisies, and that, they're all great for pollinators. And these are marigolds, which are lovely. And, you know, the marigolds and the nasturtiums can be just planted from very cheaply from packets of seeds each year, but, you know, they'll put on a great show. And these are lovely baskets that are Portlaoise tidy towns put up along our river there, the Triog River. They put on a good show. And there's some more plants. I got these kind of ideas from the Gardener's World website. And what was good was they were just showing, you know, how you can have plants for different places, shady areas, ones that will last a long time, you know, different times of the year. That's the winter box. So that's great, flowering in the winter time. And this is just looking at the pollinator friendly planting there in Portlaoise. So the tidy towns put a good bit of thought into their planting this year. So you can see they kind of looking at the daisy, all the daisies are pollinator friendly. We've got Michaelmas daisies, the chrysanthemum species, the perennial sunflowers, pot marigolds, all of those are great. And as I was saying about the Bidens, particularly the yellow varieties are good. And then the trailing bacopa is also known to be pollinator friendly now. So now just my last slide then, I just wanted to highlight the herbs. This is a lovely herb garden in the Delta Sensory Gardens in Carlow Town. But you can see there's sage, there's rosemary, chives, and all of them are pollinator friendly. They're backed up there with a lovely fern, or you can have a pot with the different herbs. And like the edible hedges I was talking about earlier, they're also a herb garden can be a lovely thing. A community herb garden can be a nice focus, as I say, for community events. And this is a leaflet from the Pollinator website, just showing how all of these are great plants for wildlife. So that's the end of my talk there now. I'll hand back to Sinead.
Fiona, thank you so much for a very interesting and a talk that was just full of great ideas as well. I'm even thinking of my own garden now, and I don't think of it too often. Leave it to itself. So thank you so much for that. I think there's lots of food for thought there for people. We have two questions in, and they're both about ivy. And you'll have probably heard these ones before. There's if ivy is in danger of weakening an old stone or historic wall, which should take precedence, the wall or the ivy? And then the next one is ivy bad for trees?
Okay, so we're going on to the stone wall. I understand, I've come across this, you know, several times, and I suppose just each instance kind of needs a bit of thought. There would be no cover everything plan when it comes to the wall. So obviously, you know, if you're dealing with the heritage site, then you need to be working with your heritage officer or with, you know, whoever, the OPW, whoever is the relevant person there. when it comes to tidy towns groups, I know, as I say, we would recommend what they call a short back and side. So if it's a case of the ivy is getting too thick and could be causing the wall to become unstable, then by all means trimming the ivy is what's needed to help, keep it under control. But yeah, when it comes to walls, you just have to be so careful because it really needs to be professionally done if it's a wall of historic significance, a special wall, because the roots can get right inside into the mortar, and if you try to pull them out, or indeed if you kill the ivy off at the base, you could end up with the wall coming tumbling down, and you don't want that either. So I'd say just to be careful on that. And then with regard to ivy killing trees, um, the thinking from the botanical thinking when it comes to ivy is that it can it can seem to take over on trees that aren't that vigorous, aren't that healthy themselves. But I mean, in the natural situation, ivy naturally grows on trees. They've naturally co-evolved in Ireland to live together. Um, but when it comes to your garden situation, and if you have your prime tree that's sitting in the middle of the lawn that you're mad about, and you don't want the ivy to take over, well then, as I say, a bit of trimming may be needed. But I suppose I really just wanted people to think about ivy and to have a good look. If you're thinking of cutting down the ivy, have a good look and have a think about it, because it's just, I would come along and I'd go past, say, maybe a hedgerow and there's trees, and someone's come along thinking they're doing good, and they've, cut the ivy stems, and the ivy's going to die off, and really the tree is doing fine, and it wasn't problematic. So I suppose it's like using, the herbicides that I think sometimes in a lot of cases it's kind of a habit. So it's just to have a think about it before maybe you do what you were thinking of doing. Does that help?
Absolutely. And, like you said, they're very important. Ivy is super important for wildlife in terms of a food source, if you like, both the berries and the flowers, but it's also great shelter for smaller birds and insects and all the rest of it as well. And
Great for nesting, and even bats hibernate in it as well. So,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
there's all sorts going on.
And we have a lovely comment from somebody saying, I didn't realize ivy was so important, so thank you for that. And I had always viewed it as a weed. Um, so another question: we have a bridge with hanging baskets. Any suggestions for pollinators, bearing in mind that it is breezy and they're trying to get away from the hardy begonia? But I suppose that's difficult if you're trying to sort your um, if it's in a windy area.
Yeah. Um, have you thought about what about maybe having herbs? Herb plants that might be, so they're small and compact, but you can get, we'd have lovely flowering thymes, rosemary, even the chives. They don't grow up too high, so they wouldn't, be catching the wind, but they'd put on a good bit of have some nice color.
Oh, lovely.
Um, yeah, it's say have a look at the those websites that I was showing, and you might get a few ideas. And definitely the pollinator planting code that has lists of different plants, and it'll have ones that are shorter and taller or whatever, depending on what you're looking for.
Lovely comments saying thank you for all the new sites that this one of our Tidy Towns groups wasn't so aware of all the various sites that you've highlighted
Great.
there. Another one, fantastic presentation, loads of ideas, can't wait to get to planting. Um, then from Marie, could you have a herb border edging where there is a row of hydrangea growing?
Um, I would say you could. Yeah, I know now the hydrangea are very thirsty plants. I love hydrangeas. They're not all that pollinator friendly, I don't think, because they are so highly bred now. But I love them, and they love our damp climate here. But I think you could, if you were, as I say, that the herbs are, if you're looking at, say, maybe chives and thyme and marigold, or the marjoram, all those kind of things. They're not, they don't grow into big plants, so they're not going to take up too much of the hydrangea's water. So yeah, I would go for it.
Yeah, and just on hydrangea, because I think I sent this out last year to our Tidy Towns group on a note, it's probably in the Ireland pollinator plants. There's only one species of hydrangea that is pollinator friendly. So it's important when you're going to your garden centres, and Fiona mentioned this, to engage with your garden centres, particularly if you've used them year on year. And when you're just saying, you're interested in the pollinator varieties of shrubs. So there
Yeah.
would be no reason why you couldn't get that one
Well, I
species
think
of
I think the
hydrangea.
ones that are more kind of the lacy flowered ones, so the lace cap ones, I think they're good. I have one of them, but also I have a climbing hydrangea, and the bees love that. So that's
Yeah,
kind of got nice open flowers. It's the mop head ones, the old-fashioned ones. They're not really any good, and I know I love them. But as I say, I'm not saying not to have those plants. It's just to be conscious of it, and to have a mix.
yes. And then David is Um, David is asking, read the grasses. You say don't mow, net or grow, which we would be aware of, and let the dandelions come. How long would you delay cutting your grass to leave your dandelions grow for?
Yeah, I would be, if it's possible, I would say leave until maybe late April. Because by that stage you're going to get other plants as well. I know we would have lots of cowslips are, in County Laois here in the Midlands. And I'm sure you'll have plenty of places where there's cowslips in Limerick too, and they have suffered terribly from the mowing too early, because what has happened is they were mown before they had set seed. But if they're allowed time to set seed, so if you leave your first mowing till April, you're going to get all sorts of wildflowers coming up. We have a beautiful local um, graveyard in Abbeyleix in the town, and it has 16 different species of wildflower, and it's because they have always left the first mowing till the end of April, and they let the cowslips come up, and it means that they've got a terrific variety there. So if you can do that, but if not, you do want them to set seed, because then they will come back next year. But ideally, the end of April.
End of April. And then from Adele, in terms of tidy towns, does having more native plants and flowers help?
Yes, certainly. I suppose, I would always be urging to see what you have. And as I say, when like talking about don't mow, let it grow. If you're able to let an area grow, you'll actually be surprised what species of wildflower will come up, and you don't need to be scattering wildflower seed, because definitely for have a look and see what's coming up in your area. And then in the more formal areas, or areas where you want more show, then those, the herbaceous perennial plants that I was talking about, those kind of things are great for that. But wildflowers are the great, the great plants for our wildlife. So just letting them develop and flower. And the same with our hedges. We've got into the habit now of the hedgerows are getting cut every year. You know, the old habit was that they were cut once every 3 years, and that allowed them to actually maximize their flowers and their fruit. Now they're cut, with being cut every year, they're not flowering as much as they would have before. And certainly, I know around here they get cut in September before the fruit is still on it, and they're being cut, and so then the local wildlife are not getting the benefit of them. So it's just letting things grow, see what you have.
Yeah. Um, and this is from Anne. Have pansies any merit? I have to say I'm a fan of the old fashioned pansy with
I know, I am
the
too.
flower.
Unfortunately, I don't think they do. Um,
Okay.
I don't think they do.
Okay. And then a great reminder in from Helen. Please remember to put up wildflower areas or manage for wildlife, as the general public sometimes thinks things are untidy and
Yeah,
unkept. And
yeah.
you would think that's very important.
Oh, yeah. So that's why I was highlighting. It was one of my slides there, and I was showing the template, and that's what the All Ireland Pollinator Plan that they've designed that template specifically for that, so that you can put up that sign. It shows the area is being managed, it is being looked after, and it gives the website for whoever's looking at it that they can go and look it up and learn a bit more about what you're doing. Definitely, yeah.
Okay. Now, I think, oh, we know. Can the wildflower seeds be harvested, or will the seeds reharvest?
Will they set seed themselves? Is that
Yes,
what?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so they will set seed themselves, but you can also harvest them. I had great fun now in the summertime. We were out. We have a lovely meadow near us here that is full of yellow rattle, which is a great species to have for your wildflower meadow, because it's a semi-parasite of grasses. So it kind of keeps the grasses under control and lets other wildflowers come up. So if you can and are able to harvest the wild seed yourself, I would say yes, by all means, collect some, but just some. Obviously, you can let the rest, go itself. But generally, when it comes to, if you're talking about, an area of lawn, and these species are growing there, they will, nature will do its thing and they'll grow themselves.
Very good. I think now that we might just make sure I've got all the questions. Oh yes, an interesting one from Michael. Why not convert unused motorway green verges to wildflower meadows? And
Yes, well, they are. That is being done. It's a great idea, and it is being done. And actually, I have to say, I know the landscape architect who works for Transport Infrastructure Ireland, and she's brilliant. She is, this work has been done all over the country, and she's doing great research into the best things to grow and all that kind of thing. So yeah, and certainly in the last year, the cowslips out on we've the M7 and the M8 going through our county here, and the cowslips were amazing. Everybody was talking about them.
that's fantastic. Yeah, that's fantastic actually. Um, we had one cowslip appeared on our green due to delayed cutting
Yeah,
last year. One, I was fascinated because it's something like this would have been an agricultural land when I was a kid, and there would have been cowslips, plenty of
I
them.
know.
Yeah.
And
So
it's just a case of them not being let set seed. But
yes,
if they are, they will come back. We've a huge amount of them in an industrial estate in Portlaoise, hundreds and hundreds of cowslips, and it's just that they're allowed set seed.
and actually, you might just make a comment on that, Fiona. The seed bank that is already there. That sometimes you really don't have to go out and buy new
No,
wildflower seed.
yeah, it's something that I feel quite strongly about, in that as a botanist, in that there's a bit of a problem in that there's wildflower seed packets available all over the place. But actually all of those, practically all of those are they're not Irish. They're brought in. So they're native to wherever they've come from. It might be Britain, but Britain has a lot of flowers that are native to there that aren't native to here. So you just have to be so careful, because you don't know what you could be bringing in, that it could be something that could end up spreading, and becoming invasive, causing a nuisance. Or another problem, which it's quite technical, botanically technical, but if you think about it, it could be problematic in that you could be bringing in, the seed for, say, uh, a, a primrose from Britain, and then it comes in and it flowers, and then it cross pollinates with an Irish primrose, and it's very interesting. But because our flora has been here for 10,000 years, and it's adapted to Irish circumstance, and it has the genetic capacity to adapt to the Irish climate. And if it ends up getting crossbred with plants from other countries, then that can mess up with that compatibility, I suppose, and you can end up maybe causing problems. So it's something that is quite problematic, which is why I would say very much let things grow and see what you have, because I guarantee you'll be pleasantly surprised. We had a case actually. If you look it up, I wrote an article that got used by the Pollinator, All Ireland Pollinator blog this year, and it was the most beautiful orchid called the green-winged orchid appeared in a friend's housing estate in Portlaoise. And it was absolutely gorgeous. We got some lovely pictures, so it went a bit viral, I think, at the time. It was so beautiful looking, and it was just that the grass mowing had been let grow for several weeks because of the pandemic, and this beautiful orchid came up, and it was recorded, but it was recorded back in 1898, I think, by Robert Lloyd Prager.
Oh my God.
On the outskirts of Portlaoise, and here it was coming back again, but it was over 100 years in the difference. So the seed bank was there. You know, it's amazing what can come up when it's let.
Wow, that story is extraordinary. But yes, and whereas you mightn't have something as rare as what you've just mentioned there, but certainly you're likely to get the early purple orchids or
Yeah,
the little orchids or that.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So I think we've answered. Would you recommend setting seed or allowing an area to go wild in that one? So thank you, Patricia,
yeah.
for that question. Um, what can be planted on north-facing walls for pollinators?
Well, the climbing hydrangea that I was mentioning there, that actually it prefers a north-facing wall, and the pollinators love it. The ivies, any of the ivies are good. And honeysuckle can be great because it can kind of it's a native plant that grows on the edges of our woodlands, and it's adapted to kind of come up and get to the light. So it'll probably grow up your wall and maybe flower up the top, and they're great for the moths. It's adapted for moths, especially. It's the long flowers, the moths have the long tongue to get in at the nectar. But they're lovely to have on a wall, say if it's a wall where people are walking, in a summer's evening when they have their scent in the evening's gorgeous. So that can be a good one
Absolutely.
too.
Absolutely. Michael would like to know, would you encourage councils to plant native Irish apple orchards rather than cherry trees?
Oh, he probably means flowering cherry trees.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I would. Yeah, yeah, sure. It's lovely. But actually with community orchards, we have I'd recommend as apples, pears, plums, and cherries. So we have two native cherry trees in Ireland. So um they can be lovely too. So yeah, go for it.
Thank you. That was very interesting and informative. Uh, Bridie, our wildflower meadow was sown from seed of native Irish wildflower 2 years ago. It's now full of oxeye daisies, which are suffocating everything else. Will this balance out, or do we need to do something?
Yeah, no, it will balance out, and that it's something. Wildflower meadows can be a little bit difficult in that, they'll come up in their first year and they look absolutely amazing. Then the second year, yes, you get all the oxeye daisies. The oxeye daisies are great. As I say, they're an important component of the Irish flora. They're great for pollinators, but they won't stay like that. It'll come to a balance. So it's not that you need to go in and cut or whatever. I know I don't know if you got advice with sowing that wildflower meadow, but the important thing is to cut and to cut in if you treat it maybe like a hay meadow and let it grow until July time, and then go in and cut it. But also to when you cut it um to let the debris kind of lie for a few days, because what you're doing is letting the seed fall out of the flower heads and go down into the soil. And then you have to gather up your cuttings. It's really important that cuttings are gathered up, because if they're left on the ground and they rot down, they're going to enrich the soil, and then you're just going to get loads of grasses. So that's the important thing when you're managing those meadows.
Yeah, it's actually a really important point because I would often advise people to pick up the cuttings, but I never thought in terms of asking them to leave them for a couple of days till
Yeah,
the heads fall off. That's really
it's the
important.
seed, and also you
Yeah,
get little insects on them as well.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Really
so
important.
ecoseeds.co.uk they're a great company. They're based up in County Down, in Downpatrick, but they're very much, it's all about native Irish wildflower seeds, and they go all over Ireland collecting the seed. But I think they also have some good advice on their website.
Very good. Thank you. Very interesting and informative. That's done. So, any other suggestions for a large north-facing bed?
Uh, it's kind of it's well. I mean, it's even though if there's plenty of light, you'd be surprised what will do. Um, have you thought about using kind of a mix of, I know we have a north-facing bed in our garden, and we have, those Estrancias I showed you, actually, there's purple ones and white ones, they're in there and they're doing great. Some of those geraniums, the flowering geraniums, I have a
Yeah.
couple of varieties in there. I have some ferns in there as well. They work well. Um, so I wouldn't be afraid. I'd put in plants kind of, that are good and robust and see what happens.
I have a north-facing front door, and I don't know what the Latin name for it is or the proper name. It's called a pincushion plant,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
it had a lot of pollinators on it this year, an awful lot of
Yeah.
activity around it, and it's just in a pot at the front door, and it flowered, I think, through till the end of October. So
That little kind of saxifrage or something like that.
you know
Maybe
what?
it's like one of those Arctic alpine.
It's a lovely little purple
Yeah.
plant,
Okay.
the pincushion it was called. Um, so and then the in terms of the seeds and the wildflower seeds and the oxeye daisies, the seeds were got from wildflowers.ie. That's Stefan
Sandra Coppola, is
Andro
it? Yeah.
Coppola.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
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 So that would be another good
Yeah. Yeah.
Irish
Yeah. He'll
site.
he'll he'll give lots of advice. He'll
Yeah,
have you mithered with advice. There'll
that's
be
good.
lots to be, yeah.
Overall, Fiona, there's been great comments, and oh, yeah, they're all thank yous coming in now rather than questions. And
Thank you very much.
people are delighted with our
Oh,
tidy
good. I'm
councillors,
glad.
they're delighted with the presentation and all the advice they were given. If I could just remind you that next Wednesday, the same time, we will be doing the sustainability category with Dee Nesbitt, who is also a Tidy Towns adjudicator. Um,
She'll give a great talk. Yeah.
I'm sure she will. I'm looking forward to it. And we're looking then at taking a 2 week break, folks, and we will be back hopefully on the 3rd and the 10th with the next two webinars, but I will let you know about that, but keep an eye out for them. Fiona, I can just say thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sinead. Thanks for having me, and thanks to everybody out there. And yeah, good luck now with the competition this year.
Yes, and thank you to all our groups who've done so much work over the year, and keep up the good work in as much
Yeah,
as you can. Stay in your bubbles, keep safe, and hopefully we'll see you next week at 8 o'clock for Dee's talk on sustainability. Good night, Fiona. Thank you
right.
again.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.